What would you do different if you're not afraid to die? Most people think about heaven as clouds and harps and endless singing. But what if heaven was that place that we actually became fully alive? I just finished a book, my first 10,000 Years in Heaven by Vance Kessler. And it stretched my imagination about what heaven will actually be like. I'll not say that he got everything perfect. He would even admit himself that he is speculating in some areas. But where I was encouraged was to exercise my imagination to what heaven might be like, where it's a place that is fully alive and vibrant and active. It's not a place that is simply passive. While there is worship of God there, that worship is not an endless song service. That worship it permeates every aspect of our being. Everything that we're doing now becomes part of our worship to God. My dad died almost 2 years ago now. And thinking about interactions with loved ones who have died, where I can see heaven as a reunion, meeting our loved ones once again, but now without pain or sorrow or grief or pain. And so it made me look forward to that reunion. And it also gave me a different appreciation of death. That death is not something to be feared anymore. In some ways, it's like a birth, that I'm being birthed into this new reality. In the book, Thomas is charged by God to write about his first 10,000 years in heaven. And God is going to send that book back to old earth so that others could read about the new heaven and the new earth that Thomas wrote about. And as I'm reading it, I'm getting excited. I'm getting hopeful. It was like I'm a foreigner and I'm reading about my home country. And so I'm listening to these narratives, I'm listening to these stories, and there's something that's resonating. Yes, that is what I'm longing for. I didn't really have the words for it, but that is what I'm longing for. And so it almost made me homesick. And so it put this life in a different perspective because it reminded me of what I'm longing for. But the real question is, why does any of this matter to our life now? When we live in the fear of death, then we tend to hold back. We live in anxiety. We don't take risk because if this is all that we get to life, then we become desperate and anxious to make the most of it, but in a desperate, frantic sort of way. On the other hand, we recognize that there's more to life and that death is simply a transition into more life, then that frees us to live fully now. We can take more risk. We can be bolder in our faith because we recognize that this is not the end, that this in many ways is just the prelude, that this is the beginning of our time, but it's not the end. So we don't have to desperately hold on to things in this life, but we don't hold back. We can now fully engage. The more we think about heaven, the more we can remember that our life is bigger than this world. And that frees us to step forward with a confident faith and give our life away because we don't have to desperately hold on to it anymore. We can rest in the assurance that God is forming us for the fullness of life and not just survival. When we know where we're going, we don't have to be afraid of the road to get there. Life in this world will still have its ups and downs, but we don't have to live in fear. We don't have to live in dread because we know where we're going. There are a few things in this book that I hope are not right, that I hope are not accurate. But the point of the book was not to name everything with precise accuracy. There's many things that we can only imagine. And that was a point to exercise our imagination because we can't hope for something we can't imagine. But if we can't imagine it, if heaven is real, then we no longer have to play it safe. We can now live boldly. We can make meaningful sacrifices. We can become the men that God has called us to be because we know that death is no longer the end of our story.